I hesitated, but I still decided to tell this story. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm a journalist, a skeptic, and someone who doesn't scare easily. At least that's what I used to believe. Over the years, I've chased urban legends, interviewed so-called ghost hunters, and debunked more supernatural hoaxes than I can count. But there's one story that still lingers in my mind. One night that changed everything. It started as a simple assignment, a small town in West Virginia, a house the locals refused to talk about, the Holloway House. The name alone was enough to send shivers through the town's older residents. I had heard the whispers, families who vanished, neighbors who saw shadows moving behind the windows, police reports filled with missing persons cases that always led back to the same address. But every time I tried to get details, people turned away. Some crossed themselves, others simply muttered, "Stay away." I should have listened. I arrived just before sunset. The house stood at the edge of a dense forest, its dark silhouette cutting against the blood-red sky. The wooden siding was warped and cracked, the windows smeared with dirt, except for one on the second floor, perfectly clean, as if someone had been watching. I didn't believe in ghosts, so I stepped inside. That night, I learned that some places don't want to be visited. Some doors, once opened, never truly close. This is what happened inside the Holloway house. I should have left the second I stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy, like the house hadn't been opened in years. Dust clung to every surface, thick and undisturbed. The wooden floors groaned beneath my boots with every step, like the house itself was warning me to turn back. But didn't. I never do. I set up my camera in the main hallway, adjusting the lens, making sure it captured the grand staircase leading up to the second floor. The walls were lined with faded floral wallpaper, peeling at the edges, revealing something darker underneath. Mold, maybe. Or something worse. I moved through the house, flashlight in one hand, recorder in the other. The kitchen was still stocked with rotting food, the fridge door hanging open. Plates sat in the sink, covered in dried, blackened residue. It was like the last people here had just left, in a hurry. Then there were the windows. Most were so covered in grime that barely any light could filter through, but one window on the second floor was different, spotless, like someone had been keeping it clean. My stomach twisted a little at that. No way was this just an abandoned house. Someone, or something, had been here recently. I shook it off and kept filming. By the time midnight rolled around, the house felt colder. Not like regular nighttime cold, but wrong. Like stepping into a freezer filled with something dead. My breath fogged in the air, and my fingers felt numb. Then I heard it dot whispers, soft at first, just a low murmur coming from upstairs. My first thought, probably the wind, maybe some raccoons in the attic. But as I listened closer, my stomach dropped to dot. It wasn't just one voice, dot. It was several. And they were talking in words I couldn't quite understand. I swallowed hard, grabbed my flashlight, and made my way upstairs. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the house didn't want me going up there. The hallway stretched out before me, lined with closed doors. The whispers were louder now, coming from the last room at the end of the hall. I reached for the doorknob. Ice cold. Like it had been sitting in a block of ice. I pushed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty. Just an old four-poster bed, a dusty dresser, and a rocking chair. It was moving, not fast. Just a slow, rhythmic creak, creak. Like someone had just gotten up from it. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to come up with some kind of logical explanation. Draft. Maybe the floorboards settling? I took a step closer. The chair stopped. I stopped too. The air felt thick, suffocating, like the room was shrinking around me. And then, just for a second, I swear I felt something standing right behind me. I turned fast, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing. I let out a shaky breath and laughed a little, more to calm myself than anything. All right, Holloway House. That the best you got? My voice sounded too loud, too forced. I backed out of the room, pulling the door shut behind me. I tried to shake it off. Just an old house, settling, just my nerves. But even as I headed back downstairs, something nagged at me. I still felt like I was being watched. I don't know why I stayed. The second I got downstairs, something felt wrong. The house had been quiet before, but now it was the kind of silence that felt intentional, like the whole place was listening. The air was heavy, thick with dust, and the smell of damp wood was stronger now, like the walls were sweating rot. I dropped onto the torn-up couch in the living room, the old fabric sagging beneath me. The cushions smelled musty, like they hadn't been touched in years. I pulled my camera from my bag, hands a little too unsteady as I clicked through the footage. The screen flickered for a second before the recording started. The grainy image of the upstairs hallway filled the frame, empty, lifeless. I fast-forwarded, scanning for anything unusual. And then I stopped. There was something in the doorway. I felt my chest tighten as I squinted at the screen. A figure. Tall, too tall, its limbs stretched unnaturally. A silhouette darker than the shadows around it. It was standing at the top of the stairs, perfectly still, watching. I hadn't seen it when I was filming. I would have seen it. I rewound the footage, played it again. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. My mouth went dry. Maybe it was a smudge on the lens, a trick of the light. I zoomed in, trying to get a clearer look, but as soon as I did, the camera froze, static. The screen filled with it, crackling, jittering, and then a face dot, just for a second. A glimpse of pale, hollowed-out eyes, staring straight into the camera. Lips parted like it was whispering something, but the screen cut to black before I could hear it. I dropped the camera, my pulse slamming against my ribs. And then tap, tap, tap. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound was soft, deliberate, coming from the front window. I turned my head slowly, every nerve in my body on edge. And then I saw it, through the smeared, dust-covered glass. A figure was standing outside still, unmoving, just there, At first, I couldn't make out any details, just a dark silhouette pressed against the window like it had been waiting for me to notice. A chill slid down my spine. I tried to convince myself it was some idiot messing with me. A local who'd heard about the legend and thought it would be funny to scare the city boy. But the longer I stared, the less that explanation made sense, Because the figure didn't move, didn't shift, didn't breathe, didn't react. Just stood there. Waiting. The tapping stopped. A long, terrible silence stretched between us, my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I swallowed hard. I should have walked away. Should have ignored it. Should have just left. Instead, I stepped forward. The floor groaned under my weight as I moved toward the window, my breath fogging against the glass. I was close enough now to make out the shape of its head, the outline of its arms. And then T twitched. A single, jerky movement. Like a glitch in a video, I staggered back, every instinct in me screaming to run. And that's when I noticed the handprint. A wet, human handprint smeared across the glass, right where the figure had been standing. I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs, but there was no one at the door, no sound outside. Nothing. I reached for the doorknob, locked, twisted harder. Still locked. I didn't lock it. I know I didn't lock it. Then comma from upstairs. Creak. My stomach dropped. The rocking chair. Moving again. And then, just behind me, a breath. Right against my ear. A whisper. He's in the window. I swear I stopped breathing. The whisper was too low, too garbled, like someone was trying to speak underwater. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. The door to the room was still cracked open, just enough for the darkness inside to stare back at me. My brain was screaming, "Don't go in. Don't be an idiot. Turn around. Leave now." But my feet wouldn't move. Every part of me was locked in place. Muscles coiled so tight I thought I might snap in half. The whisper came again. Closer this time. Inside the closet. I could hear it shifting, the rustling of fabric, the faintest creak of wood. My throat was so dry it hurt. I forced myself forward, one step at a time, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The room smelled off, wet, like mold, and something rotten sitting too long in a damp basement. The air was thick, pressing in against my skin, like the house itself was breathing. The closet door was shut. Not all the way, just enough for a sliver of black to peek through the gap. The whispering had stopped, but I could hear something else now. A sound so quiet, so wrong, it made my stomach lurch. It was like clicking, like someone was grinding their teeth together, over and over. Slow, deliberate, too loud. My fingers twitched at my side, my whole body telling me not to do it. But I had to see. I reached out, my hand shaking so bad I almost didn't feel like it was mine. My fingertips brushed the wood. It was cold, too cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer for days. I pushed the door open an inch. It creaked, slow and painful, like the house was warning me. The clicking stopped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then something moved inside the closet, fast. A sharp, jerking motion, like whatever was in there had been waiting. My entire body seized up. My instincts screamed, run. But my eyes locked onto something in the darkness. Two shapes. Eyes. Not normal eyes. Wide, black pits, empty and too deep, like holes punched through a sheet of skin. My stomach turned. My brain refused to understand what I was seeing. And then it smiled. A slow, stretching grin. Too wide, too unnatural, too fucking wrong. And then it lunged. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the rug, my body slamming into the floor so hard my vision blurred. The closet door slammed shut on its own. I scrambled back, hands scraping against the wood, every muscle screaming to get up, move, get out, but I couldn't look away. I could still hear it, the clicking, right behind the door, loud now, aggressive, like it was grinning its teeth together, waiting for me to come closer. And then, in the silence between those horrible sounds, it whispered my name. Daniel. I fucking bolted. Didn't think. Didn't breathe. Just ran. I flew down the stairs, nearly slipping on the last step, my shoulder slamming into the wall so hard I saw white. My hands fumbled for the doorknob, twisting, pulling, ripping at it. Locked. Still fucking locked. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. I clawed at my pocket for my keys, heart hammering so hard I thought it might stop. Completely behind me. The stairs creaked. One step at a time. Something was coming down. I didn't look. I wouldn't look. I shoved the key into the lock, hands shaking so bad I could barely hold on to it. The door wouldn't budge. A breath, right against my neck. I felt it. Warm. Too real. My entire body locked up. My eyes stung. I knew what was behind me. I could feel it. Standing too close, grinning, waiting. Then a voice. Soft. Almost playful. You shouldn't have come here? The lock clicked. The door swung open. I didn't think. Didn't stop. I ran. Didn't sleep. Not even for a second. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality, my brain replaying the night over and over. The eyes. The whisper. The thing in the closet. I should have left town. Should have driven until that house was nothing but a bad memory in my rearview mirror. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed answers. By morning, I was parked outside the county archives, eyes bloodshot, hands still shaking. The place smelled like old paper and dust, the kind of scent that settles in your lungs and makes you feel like you're breathing in history itself. I told the lady at the desk I was researching old properties, left out the part about nearly shitting myself in an abandoned house last night. She gave me a few records, old deeds, some newspaper clippings, and that's when I saw the name. Eleanor Holloway. The hairs on my arms stood up. I read faster, flipping through yellowed pages, the paper brittle under my fingers. Eleanor had lived in that house in the 1920s. A widow. She had a son, Thomas. Had. The word sent a chill down my spine. The article said he drowned in the lake behind the house. when he was just 7 years old. His body was never found. Eleanor swore he wasn't gone. She told neighbors he still came home at night, that he spoke to her through the windows, that she could see him watching her. I swallowed hard and my mouth dry. The reports got weirder after that. People claimed they saw her talking to someone who wasn't there. At first it was harmless, just a grieving mother refusing to let go. But then they heard her screaming at nothing, crying, whispering in a language no one recognized. A milkman delivering bottles early one morning saw her standing in the upstairs window, staring down at him with a grin too wide for her face. And then, one night, it ended. She was found in her rocking chair, still as stone. Her mouth frozen mid-scream. Her skin was ice cold, her hands curled into claws against the armrests, and her eyes were missing. I slammed the file shut, bile rising in my throat. The room felt too quiet. The sound of my own breathing was deafening. My pulse pounded. I knew that rocking chair. I saw it move, and I knew those eyes, the ones in the closet. I took a shaky breath and turned back to the last page in the file. One final note, scribbled in the margin by an officer at the scene. 4 words that made my blood turn to ice. The closet door was open. I shouldn't have gone back. I knew that deep down, but I couldn't stop myself. The house had a grip on me, something I couldn't explain, like it was pulling me in, daring me to see what was really going on. I parked in front of the old place as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first hint of chill hit me. Cold. Too cold. My breath fogged up in front of me, even though it wasn't even that late yet. There was something wrong about the air tonight. Something thick, like it was waiting for me. I grabbed my camera and gear, checking it one more time, making sure everything was running. The old floorboards creaked beneath my boots as I walked inside. It was darker than I remembered, the house swallowing up any light I tried to cast into it. I felt the walls close in on me with every step. I set my gear up in the same spot as the night before, pointed it at the same damn rocking chair. It was hard to ignore how the place felt like it was alive, like it was watching me, every creak and groan of the house sending a shiver down my spine. But I wasn't backing down this time. I wasn't going to be one of those guys who chickened out without proving something. I had to see it all. The truth, whatever the hell that was. Night fell fast. Too fast. I had the place to myself. The silence was thick, suffocating. The only sound was the soft hiss of the wind outside and the occasional drip of water somewhere in the walls. I started to feel it again. That weird, prickling feeling at the back of my neck, like someone was standing right behind me, breathing down my spine. I kept moving, trying to shake it, trying to focus. But the air felt colder now, much colder. My breath was fogging up more than it should, like it had turned into winter overnight. I reached for my jacket, but it wasn't enough. The cold dug into my skin, seeping deep into my bones. That's when I heard it, dot. The creak dot, the rocking chair. It was slow at first, just a whisper of movement, like a breeze brushing against it. Then, it started rocking harder, faster. It was as if it was alive, something stirring in the dark. I didn't look at it at first, too afraid to, but I could feel it. I could feel it staring at me. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my camera, set it on record, and pulled up the footage from last night. My hands were shaking like crazy as I clicked through the footage, my eyes glued to the screen. The sound of the chair rocking grew louder in the background. I skipped ahead to the part where I thought I saw something odd. When I heard that whisper, when I froze by the closet door, I didn't see it then, dot. But now I saw it. A dark figure, tall, shadowy, standing behind me. Its face was barely visible, swallowed by the blackness, but the outline was enough to make my heart stop. It had been right behind me, watching me, and I never knew it. The screen flickered. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked around the room, my body suddenly too aware of the shadows lurking in every corner. I needed to leave. I knew I did. But then That whisper again. It wasn't in my ear this time. It was in my head. Clear. Cold. He's in the window. I turned, my eyes snapping to the window, my heart racing. The light was too dim to make out much, but the feeling of being watched, that was worse than ever. I swear, I saw something move, just beyond the glass. Like the reflection of a figure. Too faint to catch. But there. Then, the chair. The chair was still rocking, but now it was almost violent, creaking louder, the wood bending, straining. Something inside it was alive. I don't know how to explain it. But the chair wasn't just moving, it was shaking, like something was forcing it to rock back and forth. The sound was maddening, the wood screeching as if it was about to split in half. And then, the voice dot right next to me. He's in the window, waiting. I could feel it then, like fingers grazing my neck, cold, wet, as if something was brushing against my skin, dragging me toward the window. My body moved before I could think. My legs started walking, dragging me toward it, like I had no control. I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I couldn't stop. The window was calling me. I reached out, hand shaking, but the second I got close enough, the lights flickered. I heard a low, guttural growl, like something was clawing from the other side of the glass. I backed away, but then the window shattered. The glass exploded outward, sharp shards cutting through the air like daggers. I stumbled back, my breath coming in quick gasps. I couldn't see anything beyond the darkness, just the silhouette of the house in the distance, the moon casting long shadows over the lawn. And then I heard it again. That whisper. You're next. I didn't know what was worse. Hearing that whisper, or the way the air seemed to press in on me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like the house itself was suffocating me, wrapping me up in its cold, dead grip. I stumbled back, my feet tripping over the uneven floorboards, and I swear I saw something dart across the hallway, just out of the corner of my eye. But when I turned, there was nothing there. Not a damn thing. My heart pounded in my chest, every muscle in my body frozen, like I couldn't move if I wanted to, but I had to move. I had to get out of there. I ran toward the door, grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked. Locked from the outside. Panic hit me like a freight train. I rattled the doorknob, yanking at it, slamming my shoulder into the door, but it wouldn't give. That whisper, it was in my head again, clearer this time, almost like it was behind me, just inches from my ear. He's coming, it said. You can't leave. My whole body went cold. I didn't want to turn around, didn't want to face whatever was waiting behind me. But I had to. I had to know. Slowly, I turned and I saw him. The figure. Tall, dark, with those hollow eyes. His face was barely visible in the shadows, but I could see enough to know he wasn't human. His skin was gray, sickly, stretched tight over his bones like he hadn't eaten in decades. His fingers were long and bony, reaching out toward me like he was pulling me in. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. He took a step closer, and the floor beneath me creaked like it was about to collapse. The air grew heavier, thicker, and the temperature dropped even further. I felt like I was freezing from the inside out. I was trapped. No escape. And that whisper, it kept coming, getting louder and louder until it was all I could hear. He's here, it said. And then I realized it wasn't just one whisper. It was dozens, hundreds, echoing from every corner of the house, overlapping each other until it was a deafening roar. I looked around, and the walls, they were moving. The shadows on the walls were shifting, twisting into shapes I couldn't recognize. Faces, hands. Figures reaching out to me, crawling closer, stretching towards me like they were going to drag me under. I closed my eyes, tried to block it out, but it was all I could hear, all I could see. My pulse was so loud I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I had to get out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, pinned to the spot by whatever the hell was in that house. And then I felt it. Something cold and clammy against my skin. A hand on my shoulder. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, nothing except the darkness. And then I realized I was never alone in this house. I never was. I don't know how long I sat there, my heart still racing, my body trembling with the aftershocks of what I had just witnessed. But when I finally opened my eyes, the room was different. The walls weren't moving anymore. The whispers had stopped, and the oppressive air that had weighed me down all night was gone. I was lying on the floor in the same place where I had collapsed, but everything else had changed. The once immaculate room was now a mess. Furniture overturned, books scattered across the floor, torn curtains hanging loosely from the windows. The rocking chair, the one that had been so still the night before, was now twisted at an odd angle, facing the wall, creaking back and forth like it was alive. My camera, the one I'd set up to capture everything, was on the ground too. Smashed beyond recognition, my heart thudded in my chest as I stood up, disoriented, my legs still unsteady. The feeling of being watched hadn't gone away, even in the silence. But there was no sign of the figure, no sound, nothing. It was as if the house had just left me there, abandoned in the wreckage. I stumbled out of the room, still trying to piece together what had happened, but the hallway was empty. No shadows, no whispers, just the remains of a place that had once felt like it was alive with something else, something I had never been meant to understand. I didn't know how I managed to leave, but somehow I did. I walked out the front door into the cold, gray morning light, the house standing behind me like a silent, watching thing. When I got to my car, I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The drive home was a blur, just the hum of tires on the road and the sound of my own thoughts spinning in circles. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't real, that it was all in my head. But I knew deep down that it wasn't. Whatever was in that house, whatever I had seen, it wasn't just a trick of the mind. It was real, and I'd come too close. After that night, I couldn't bring myself to visit another place like that. I couldn't even think about it without feeling that cold, crawling fear creeping up my spine again. So I left it all behind. Those stories, those places. Never again.